Welcome to HQ Spotlight, and we start with the Big Ten on CBS this week, which takes us to Autzen Stadium. Top 10 matchup between Indiana and Oregon. First Big Ten matchup between teams entering 5-0 or better with a better than 30%, or rather points per game differential, since Chicago hosted Northwestern in 1904. Hey there, folks. Welcome to the Pick Show. Every college football team ranked in the AP Top 25 we are going to talk about, and I have one half of the Cover 3 podcast in Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson. I'm Tommy Tran. We'll be talking about our handful of big games and then go through the rest chronologically, but this one is a big one here. We got college football today, Big Ten on CBS. Our girl Jenny Dell will also be there. So we're going to talk about quarterbacks. We're going to talk about head coaches, but I do want to ask you guys sort of on a hype level, where does this register, DK, on a scale of 1 to 10?
It's big. I mean, it's one of the bigger games of the season. You know, we were talking about, does it match up to the Penn State-Oregon matchup that we saw a couple weeks ago? And I don't think it's quite there, because that was a game we had circled in the preseason, all offseason. It was a game we were really looking forward to. The best part about this game is that it's a surprise big game, because Indiana, there were so many question marks about Indiana. Could they back up what they did last year? And here they are, just as good, if not better than they were last year. And Oregon, who we thought was going to be good, they look like they could be even better than last year. So I do think it's one that maybe didn't have the off-season hype, but in season, it absolutely is living up to one of those huge games.
Chip?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that for me, we are always looking at Oregon as a team that they are still going through just their second year of Big Ten membership. We don't have a lot of history. And the fact that they went unbeaten in league play last year, won the Big Ten title, now every single time, it doesn't matter whether it's Penn State, it doesn't matter whether it's Indiana, anybody who's been a part of this league for a long time, you going up against Oregon, you're kind of, standing up for the rest of the Big Ten OGs, because Oregon right now is standing at the top of the mountain, and especially after beating Penn State in Happy Valley, their grip on that flag is tighter than ever. So, yeah, I think that anytime that the Ducks, who are absolutely a main character in this conference, are going to get tested by another ranked team in conference play, it's got my attention for the X's, the O's, the Jimmies, the Joes, but also just what it means for Oregon, a still very new member of this league.
So let's pick up on that. I mentioned we'll talk about the head coaches, Chip, so let's get there right now. Let me ask you, you mentioned the Ducks and Dan Lanning. You mentioned Kirk Cignetti fighting off of that. Hey, does Indiana belong in the college football playoff type talk? This would go a long way into boosting either head coach with a win this weekend.
But without a doubt, I think that these are two of the three best coaches in the Big Ten. I think that they have proven so many different times of what they can do at different levels. And so, like, for Kirk Cignetti, the fact that he has been able to come into year two at Indiana and then back it up with the same kind of ruthlessness and relentlessness that was the identity of that Indiana team last year. And you want to talk about identity, who better represents their head coach than the way that the Oregon Ducks handle their football? All across the country, we see coaching jobs where it just kind of seems like you're the overseer of the program. No, these are two head coaches in Dan Lanning and Kirk Cignetti that live it, that breathe it, and that understand it on a very deep level. We made a joke the other day. It's like, can you ever accomplish anything great without your college football coach being a little bit crazy? And the unanimous answer was no. You need your college football coach to be a little bit crazy if you want to compete for championships, and I think we've got just the right amount of crazy with both of these.
Totally agree. I mean, the scene and Dan Lanning, you saw how pumped up he was after they got the win at Penn State, and then we've seen Kirk Cignetti, little chip on his shoulder. You mentioned last year the way they were treated at the end of the season, almost left out, and then when they lose to Notre Dame, it's like, see, they don't belong there. That has irked Kirk Cignetti to no end this entire offseason, and it does feel like they're on a mission to not only prove themselves last year, to prove that last year wasn't a fluke either for the Hoosiers. So much at stake in this game. Outstanding coaches, different points in their career, and you can't diminish either one, the jobs they've done at their respective programs. Should be a really fun matchup.
And Danny, we should have a pretty good quarterback matchup. Fernando Mendoza and Dante Moore, which, by the way, these two met in the old Pac-12 back in 2023 with Cal and UCLA. What piques your interest with these two?
I mean, these are arguably two of the best quarterbacks in college football going toe-to-toe. And Fernando Mendoza, who who I thought was an upgrade over Curtis Rourke. Boy, he has delivered and then some. I didn't think it would be this much of an upgrade. He's got a higher end on the arm talent. He's more mobile. And then Dante Moore, the surprise of the season for the Ducks, where he is this season. Statistically, they're towards the top, but also eye test. Dante Moore, the big question was for a young quarterback, his first year as the full-time starter at Oregon, how would he handle the atmosphere in Happy Valley in a whiteout? He looked so calm, so poised, that it seems like no situation is too big for him. Now that question is sort of reversed on Fernando Mendoza. He did go to Iowa City, did get a win against Iowa. Numbers came down a little bit against a really good defense in Iowa. Now, can he pull off this unbelievable upset and put that Hoosier team on his back?
3 games with 4 more passing touchdowns and no picks for Mendoza, which is most in FBS, but Moore is also right there. 4 games with 3 or more, no picks. So you're getting good on good in this particular matchup. Total in the mid-50s, a spread of 7.5. Interesting enough if that hook matters to you guys. Chip, I'm going to give you first word. You and Dan are playing things a little bit differently, but a chance for both of you guys to cash here.
It matters. It matters a lot to me. You know, I'm looking at this, and I do think that Indiana is going to be very competitive in this game. I've got some questions about Oregon in terms of third quarter and second half performance, but not questions that are big enough for me to go with an outright fade. But I think Oregon starts fast. I was also looking at a little Oregon first half, but not a great number there to act on. So if I do think this is going to be competitive, and if I do think that Indiana is going to have a chance to be able to score a little bit late, how about a little Indiana team total over 23.5? We've got an NFL quarterback. We've got an offensive line that's been boosted in the offseason. And we've got an Oregon defense that, while I do think is very, very good, hasn't been tested by an offense this good yet this season, and I know that they had to play against Penn State. I think Indiana is a more dangerous offense than Penn State. I think it's a more explosive offense than Penn State. If Penn State got to 17 in regulation against this Ducks defense, I think Indiana can get me one more touchdown.
Do you guys think Kirk Cignetti's watching our show?
Yes.
I hope not. No, you think he is. I hope he's not. I mean, he probably is, because he's probably looking for some bulletin board material. So hopefully he can use this. He can clip this for his team, because all I have to go off is historically, in the very short window that he's been there, how is Indiana stacked up against the very best competition they faced? And while they have blown out a lot of opponents last year and this year, including Illinois, which was one of the most spectacular performances we've seen from a team that's in the top 15, they absolutely annihilated them. But you go back to Ohio State last year, you back to the game against Michigan, which they did win, but that was a down year for Michigan. And then you do go to the playoff games where it was rubbed right in Indiana's face, that performance against Notre Dame. I think Oregon, and this should not be a slight to Indiana, because I think Oregon is one of the best teams in the country, sort of a tier all by themselves. I am not afraid of the hook. I think Oregon wins by double digits. Dante Moore has so many weapons around him. DeCorian Moore is a speedster on the outside. They've got a slew of running backs in the backfield. They can run the ball. And then Mateo Uyunglele and that defense, I think, will provide some problems. I do think Fernando Mendoza is going to get challenged more so than at any point this season by a defense. Crowd noise, not going to be able to hear up front. I think they could struggle to protect him, so I do like the Ducks to win and cover.
Winner of this one, inside track with Ohio State potentially down the road in the Big Ten title game. And speaking of the reigning champs and number 1 team in the country, they're going to be favored by 14 and a hook against Illinois in Champaign. So all the Buckeye fans who enjoyed one night game, you're back playing noon, and then it's 11 a.m. local again over there in Champaign. The defense, Danny, has been obviously dominant so far. The question will become, can Illinois and Luke Altmaier score enough points? So before we get into picks here, how are you viewing that particular matchup?
Oh, I think this is going to be an incredible matchup. This will be Ohio State's biggest test, right? I know Texas was supposed to be that big matchup going against Arch Manning, but as we've learned now, that Texas offense is a shell of what they once were. Even Washington, which was a really good, impressive performance, I don't think Damon Williams was as experienced and ready and as much of a complete team as Illinois is over there. So I think this will be their biggest test yet. And trust me, I think they're up for the challenge, but I would be surprised if their defensive numbers, which are historic, able to hold points in the single digits. I would be surprised if that continues.
5 points per game allowed. That's the fewest through 5 games of any Big Ten team since 1985 in Michigan. What about you, Chip, when you're taking a look at that particular matchup, OSU defense, Illinois offense?
I think that for Luke Altmaier, the fact that he has been tasked with carrying so much of the offense is something that has allowed him to shine, but it is also not great for Illinois as a team and also for Illinois' offense as a whole. So, are they going to be able to block Caden Curry and Averill Reese and the rest of these, players up front for Ohio State? Because right now, this Illinois team cannot run the ball very successfully, and it's led to them throwing the ball more. Now, I don't think Luke Altmaier is just stacking stats here. I think he is excellent and one of the best quarterbacks, unquestionably, in the entire country. But now you're throwing against a secondary that has some real dudes on the back end of it, and that is going to be something that is going to be really, really tough, because what happened against Indiana? The Illinois found themselves in a hole. They were made one-dimensional offensively, and then Indiana was able to pin their ears back. What was the result? A 53-point win for Indiana. Illinois, they cannot let this thing get so sideways that Ohio State's going to be able to play that same approach, because that obviously is one of the worst performances that Altmaier's had this year.
So if we look at the spread, Chip, the previous game you did have issues with the hook. This time around, the hook not mattering to you, 14.5.
Yeah, I don't love the 14.5 on the road against a quality opponent, but I saw a switch get flipped with this Ohio State team. Like, they're down 3-0, right? All of a sudden, you're saying, whoa, wait a second, what's happening to the offense? And then all of a sudden it wakes up. Julian Sayan's getting more put on his plate, and he's just, He's ready to eat it all. He's ready to start to enlighten this offense by hitting Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Max Clare over the middle. The running back room continues to get deep. I just think that the Buckeyes started the season riding the elite defense, but they're really starting to unlock something offensively. And against an Illinois team that can get after the passer, but also give up huge plays on defense, I just think there's going to be a lot of explosive plays in this game, where even if it feels like Illinois is just a drive or two away, the final score does end up having Ohio State as a 17 to 20 point winner.
I kind of like the way Chip is thinking here. I do think Ohio State should have a pretty comfortable win. And boy, Ohio State fans, they were not happy with me. I said Julian Sayin against Texas, it didn't look like Ryan Day trusted him in that game. I thought he really kept him under wraps. I think maybe a better way to give you an analogy is, I think since that game, which I don't think he trusted him fully because they were in complete control, they didn't have to. Then I thought the training wheels were on somewhat. You're teaching a young kid how to drive, how to ride a bike. Keep those training wheels on. It's a little bit easier. You can wobble a little bit, but you're still going to be caught by that defense if you do have a mistake. And then now, and I think what you saw against Minnesota is when you take off those training wheels, you give them that push, you're maybe handing it there, and then it's like, hands off, way to go, way to go. Julian Sayin is getting more and more comfortable. So I think his progression has been outstanding. The way they've kind of taken baby steps with him step by step, he's leading the country in completion percentage, which is unbelievable for a first-year starter to do that. Chip mentioned all the weapons that are out there, but I am not tackling the Ohio State number and laying the 14.5. I'm going to go for the total and say this is a higher scoring game. We already saw one game. I think there's multiple ways to win. One, Ohio State blowout. If it does get sideways like it did against Indiana, Ohio State might cover this number by themselves. But I do think Luke Altmaier, who was running for his life, I do think he has been doing a good job of getting the ball out of his hands, hitting those quick hitters. He's been very good with the football. I do think Illinois, even if it's a backdoor cover type situation, I think they'll still be throwing the ball around, being able to move the ball down the field with that short pass game, maybe hitting a big play or two. I think Ohio State wins, but I also think it goes over that 49.5.
Okay, taking the over, laying the 14 and a hook there for Chip Patterson. Now we do have another ranked game, which we'll save for the next block. We're kind of keeping this in the Big Ten type vibe. And so you have number 15, Michigan, catching 2.5 at the Coliseum against USC with a total of 57 and a hook. You guys are actually on opposite ends, but before we get to the picks, we had talked about before coming into this big game for Michigan if they're able to pull off the victory, DK.
Oh my goodness. And we saw Nebraska. We were in Lincoln for the Michigan game and got to see Bryce Underwood and that run game in person, saw the defense in person. And I know in that game, Bryce Underwood's stats didn't really jump out to you. I think he just had over 115, 120 yards passing. What impressed me was his command of the offense, and he didn't make that big mistake. He tucked it and ran it where he's really become a weapon. And now with their backfield, they're going back to sort of what they've been under Jim Harbaugh and now Sharon Moore, which is a physical team up front and great defense. And if they continue to develop Bryce Underwood and they're able to get through this test, I think they're going to be a tough out that probably looks like a playoff team if they can pass this test out in LA.
Chip, what do you make of the quarterback matchup in this game?
Oh, man, I think Jaden Maeva is probably being overlooked and underrated in this matchup, and it's because they didn't win against Illinois. You know, there's another way that we write the narrative where if USC does end up coming out on top in that hard-fought back-and-forth battle where USC offensive linemen are going down left and right, Maeva's still keeping them in the game along with some help from Mekhi Lemon, well, then now all of a sudden we're talking about him as one of the top quarterbacks in the country. I still think Jaden Maeva has proven more than Bryce Underwood has. The problem is we're just feeling a little bit shaky about USC as a team, where I think Bryce Underwood, it might be a little bit, I don't want to say the O word, but let's just say that our value and our thought of Bryce Underwood, his Q score, might be inflated a little by how we are looking at this Michigan team and this offense, because individually advantage Maeva, but in terms of your ability to single-handedly lead your team to success, yeah, Underwood does seem to have a little bit of a brighter future, but incredible opportunity for USC and for Maeva to respond, because if you just look at the raw data, this is still one of the best passing attacks in the entire country, and they've got a good opportunity if they can prove it against this Michigan defense.
So let me set it up. SC coming off extra rest in that walk-off loss to Illinois in Champaign a couple weeks ago. Michigan did beat Wisconsin, but they didn't cover the number, anywhere between 16.5 and 17.5 to that late field goal to win by 14. I mentioned you guys are on opposite sides. The time off, does that matter for this game when it comes to you, DK?
Yes, it does. This team was really banged up going against Illinois, and that was starting to become very alarming, the way Illinois was able to push around USC on both sides of the line of scrimmage. But Chip mentioned something, and I think Bryce Underwood, the future is bright for him, but the future is now with Jaden Maeva. Even in that game against Illinois, he was making so many tight window throws down the field. He is in complete command, and I do think Lincoln Riley, and I believe this before the loss against Illinois, I think he's found his quarterback. Now it becomes a pride game, and this is a huge inflection point for USC and for Lincoln Riley specifically. This is a game you are supposed to win. I think they get up for it. I do think they win this game. I think Michigan has been really good, and I think they continue to get better. But what Lincoln Riley said, we're getting closer, we're getting closer. They haven't done it. It was a close loss against Illinois. I think they win this one, and they do win by more than a field goal.
My pick's going to be with Michigan. This one is absolutely buying into the idea that the Michigan team that went on the road to play Oklahoma learned a little bit about themselves in a loss. And then when they went to go play Nebraska, and it was not a perfect performance. They made some mistakes. It probably should not have been as close as it was, but they looked a little bit better and they learned something. And I think that for a group that not just Bryce Underwood, but has a lot of new players taking on new roles, every single time you get a new breakout star, and it's not just Bryce Underwood and Justice Haynes, looking at McClellan in the win against Wisconsin, every single week that you get that is a group that continues to mature on the fly. So I'm going to be buying into a rising stock here, a true coin flip game. I just think that wrong team might be favored, so I'll take Michigan plus the points.
Love for it to play out like it did last year. 3-point game. Mullings with that go-ahead in Ann Arbor to give UM the victory over USC. Time to hit a break here on the show, but when we come back, we'll tackle our third ranked-on-ranked matchup after the break. Bama and Mizzou with the Crimson Tide laying 3.5 on the road. Another good block of games that we have in college football. Now, this is sort of a recurring theme for Kalen DeBoer. Again, all-time, ranked opponents, no matter where he's been. That continued with victories over Georgia and Vanderbilt the last couple of weeks. This time around, 3.5-point favorites at Mizzou with a total of 52 and a hook. Back here with DK and Chip. By the way, I did not mention at the top of the show, a little bit of a rough week for you guys. I think 6-9, 6-10 respectively, but way to get back on the schneid here with this game and all the rest that we have coming up on our slate. So, Alabama seeking a 3-0 start in league play with all three wins against ranked opponents for the first time in program history. Chip, giving you first word here of what we've seen from Alabama, and I know there's always the talk about Kalen DeBoer as a favorite. This is not double digits, but on the road as a favorite this week.
Yeah, what an incredible test of the maturity of this locker room. Thank goodness they've got some great veterans of the likes of Ty Simpson, of the likes of Caden Proctor, Deontay Lawson, Tim Keenan, and more, because let's just zoom out a little bit. You had the win at Georgia. Then you followed it up with the revenge game against Vanderbilt. And what's up ahead next week? Oh, yeah, third Saturday in October against Tennessee. And here's a Missouri team that is unbeaten and dangerous. And they've just been sitting around either on an off week or playing UMass for what feels like the last month. So, yeah, you better be locked in, because this is an upset alert siren that is going off, and it has nothing to do with Kalen DeBoer. It has to do with the rigors of the Alabama football schedule. I think that what they will find in Missouri is a group that is ready, at least battle-tested enough to be tough defensively, but are they going to be able to inflict the same kind of punishment on Alabama that they have against the rest of their schedule? That is what I am not very confident in. So as I was going through to break down this game, don't feel confident enough in a Missouri outright upset to be able to take the small number. For the Alabama side, I could see this being a little hairy, but I think slow starting is what you get with the ups and downs and the rigors of the game. So that's why in terms of a best bet, I'm going first half under 26.5.
Did you guys see the coaches call today? The Zoom call between the SEC coaches? They had Eli Drinkwitz, and he actually asked Kalen DeBoer if he was wearing the black hoodie. And I think the black hoodie might be coming back, which I think should have Eli Drinkwitz very, very concerned. Missouri, to me, is a little bit of smoke and mirrors, right? Their schedule, They're undefeated. They had one against Kansas, which was really good, I think. They also beat South Carolina, which was really good, I think. But they also were a little bit closer than you would like for a team that is ranked as high as Missouri is. And they've been awesome. Mart Hardy, the running back from Missouri, leading the SEC in rushing, has been an outstanding story. Bo Pribula, they've got Penn State fans wishing that he was still up there in Happy Valley playing quarterback for them. But we've seen this story before. Last year, Missouri was one of the hottest teams in the country. They go out to A&M and get absolutely smoked. I was surprised at this number, that it was so low. I'd even be willing to take an alt line, Tommy, up to 6.5, and you get crazy and you want to go up there around 9.5, feel free to do that. Alabama is on a mission. The veteran leadership combined with the motivation that was provided after losing to Florida State, I think is all they needed. It's exactly what they needed. This team is motivated. They're getting outstanding quarterback play with Ty Simpson. The defense is finally starting to come together. I think this is where Missouri gets exposed somewhat. I'll take Alabama.
You mentioned Hardy. He leads FBS in rush yards, and Alabama's only given a 100-yard rusher. It was Chauncey Bowens in that Georgia game back in Week 5. Okay, red rivalry here. Oklahoma, Texas. Number 6 team in the country catching a 1.5 against Texas out in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl. Now, I did a segment yesterday on HQ with our insider Matt Zenitz and our 24/7 sports guy who covers the Sooners and Josh Calloway. What did we talk about? Who else? John Mateer. Is he going to play? Yes, Chip, the hand, the surgery. So he was projected to be about a month. If he gets to play this game, that's about 3 weeks. And all this talk about Dr. Shin out there in Norman, and he's like a whisperer to get these guys back. Just from the Mateer perspective, it seems to me that this line is baked in with him playing, Danny.
Ooh.
So just from a Mateer angle here, what's the thought process of what you think he'll play? And obviously Michael Hawkins the backup.
See, I don't think he's playing, and I think the number reveals that. Because I think Oklahoma might be a favorite based on what we saw last weekend with Texas losing to the Florida Gators at the Swamp. I know this is neutral site, but I do think this is one story that everybody has their eyes on. And to me, if you're Brent Venables and you're looking at this game and you're looking at the way the schedule unfolds and the big picture for the playoffs, if you don't play John Mateer, you will be viewed differently than with Michael Hawkins. And if you do lose this game close without Mateer, I don't think it's going to penalize you at all. In fact, it's probably a mulligan. Then you have South Carolina. You got some winnable games before you get to really some of the tougher games of your schedule. So I look at this, I'll be surprised if Mateer does play in this game. I think this is Michael Hawkins. I think this is a defensive slugfest between two outstanding defenses. So I do not anticipate Mateer to play.
Chip?
Yeah, Tommy, I think that Oklahoma's a 3.5-point favorite if they knew Mateer was playing.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's been better. I think Oklahoma's been better against good competition. I think John Mateer is that much of a difference that he is worth 4 or 5 points, somewhere around there on the spread. I think that we saw, remember Texas was sitting opener around like 3, right? then all of a sudden we get the whispers that he's trying to get back. Now it gets bought back to 1.5. I wouldn't be surprised if they do a little gamesmanship. We see this thing flip. But if John Mateer was 100% healthy going into this game, based on the performances that we've seen from both these teams, I think the Sooners are better. This is a neutral field. Literally the most neutral field we get. It's like half the places in orange and half the places in crimson. And I think that the Sooners have been the better football team and are a more worthy favorite. So I think that this is a split the difference, but leaning towards Mateer not playing. And even still, I think that this line isn't smelling funny to me. I think it is a coin flip, even without Mateer.
So just to be clear, I don't know if I said it with both Matt Zenitz and Josh talking about things are trending in a good way, in a positive way, but nothing definitive on Mateer. And to be fair, Venables is not going to disclose anything.
No.
He wants them to be preparing for all the guys that he can. You know, the good old depth chart or having them in there.
And he's been practicing with him. Mateer was dressed out last week against Kent State. He's going to be dressed out in pregame. We'll see if he's handing off. Everybody's going to be watching him. We probably will not find out until they actually take the field with that offense. But I think it's a lot of subterfuge right here. I think this is Brent Venables playing coy. Team is practicing indoors.
Yes, that's what Josh was saying. Indoors, closed doors, tight-lipped, right?
Yes, they do not want anybody to know who's playing. And I still don't think Mateer plays.
So it's probably why you guys don't have a strong play on the spread. But you guys have actually both targeted the total here. So, Chip, why don't you take me through the total first and what you think in this game?
Yeah, first of all, you're being so loud about how John Mateer might play. It makes me think he's not going to play. So
right.
Throwing that to the side, I'm going to go on principles. Too much cloudiness, right? I need to see things clear as day. And what I see is I see big text. I see the corn dog. I see the big golden hat. And I see a disrespectful total for the Red River rivalry. Now, I understand that last year's edition of this game did go under this number, but each of the previous 9 times the Texas and Oklahoma have played each other in the game of football, it has gone over this total of 43.5. And I know that we just look at the way both these teams handle business, both of these excellent defenses. I get it. But there is too much skill, talent on the field for us not to get a pick six or a return or some way that this ball ends up getting across the goal line and into the end zone. It is just not fitting for the Cotton Bowl. It is not fitting for the Red River rivalry. We deserve points and fireworks here. So with so much cloudiness about the availability of Oklahoma star quarterback, I am only left with principles. And I am going over this total because it's disrespectful to the rivalry.
Wow. All right. I'll say maybe we can both win this one, right? Because I think these defenses are still some of the best. Now, Texas last week at the Swamp, their defense was getting carved up. So that does have me a little bit concerned. But I think they have a big bounce-back performance. And we already talked about Mateer not playing. This Oklahoma offense is limited in the pass game. Even if you go look at the stats, Michael Hawkins had 3 touchdown passes. The final number looked pretty good, 44-0 against Kent State. But I think they're going to try to run the football. And I think it's going to be running into a brick wall, especially if they're as limited as they are. Also, a little bit concerned because Arch Manning, they have found some shot plays, and he did hit one against Florida last week, but he also threw an interception in that game, 2 of them, but one of them really was one of those costly ones. So I'm well aware that they do like to take some shot plays, but ultimately, I think the first half, a lot of feeling out, who's playing, what type of game's going to see unfold. I know the number's incredibly low, but at least I get over that magical number of 21 and a hook. So I will take first half under as those defenses are on display early.
Texas lost to the Swamp for a variety of reasons, but obviously no C.J. Baxter pregame. Then Parker Livingstone, who had a big catch that led to a score, also got hurt. So we'll see how healthy they're going to be getting into this game with a rivalry game. Speaking of rivalry games, we get Georgia laying 3.5 against Auburn with a total in the mid-40s. This will be a night game at Jordan-Hare. Danny, what do you like about this game? Do you have a strong feeling about something here?
Yeah, I think this game's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be gross. I mean, Auburn is a tough place to play, and this feels another inflection point. Talked about earlier with USC and Lincoln Riley. This is such a massive game for Hugh Freeze and company, but he has a problem, and it's a quarterback problem because Jackson Arnold has struggled mightily in the pass game. They're going to try to run the football. I think they might even try to slow the pace down, which is a little bit uncharacteristic for what they want to do, and I know Georgia is not going to be going at tempo, and Georgia's offense has been decent. It has not been great. I think there's been some frustration there. So I think this is a lower scoring game that probably does come down to a field goal like the experts expect, but I'm going to go ahead and take the under 45.5. I could see a game sort of that 23-20 type of situation where it is a nail biter for all parties involved. If Auburn loses this game, it's Hugh Freeze. Where do they go? And if Georgia loses this game, oh my goodness, watch out for the Mike Bobo calls, their offensive coordinator. Oh my goodness, what is happening? The sky is falling, but I think this is a lower scoring affair.
Yeah, Danny, I was just over here looking for my mask. Sometimes I've got the mask ready for sicko. I mean, this is toxic. This is a toxic matchup. It's not a win. It's a don't lose. So give me Auburn plus those 3.5 points. You're playing in Jordan-Hare at night. This is the kind of ugly game that Auburn figures out a way to either win or at least keep it close enough that you're right, Danny. There's going to be, maybe it's the fingernails game because you ain't going to have any of them by the end of it, whether you root for Auburn or whether you root for Georgia. It's just two teams that are not in a good place. Neither team is close to their preseason expectations. It is one of the oldest rivalries in all of college football, and it's in that stadium at night under the lights. Toxic environment. Hazmat Saturday in the SEC.
Tigers were feeling good like 3 weeks ago. 3-0 start, then you get Oklahoma and Texas A&M, and now Georgia, so we'll see how it all plays out for them. But they are at home. That's the one thing this weekend. Time to hit another break here on the show. When we come back, Florida State staying in the top 25 despite the loss to Miami at home. We'll get the fellas' thoughts on the Noles being double-digit favorites over Pitt at Doak Campbell. Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. Time to target the best of the rest. So we're going to chronological order. We do have a Friday night game. The USF Bulls are back in the AP Top 25 after their victory against Charlotte, taking on North Texas with a total in 68.5. In the words of Pete Prisco, this game could get loose, as he would say. It is a tight spread, too, 1.5 here. Danny, which side are you on here? You on the USF Bulls to get back on track and come away with the high-scoring game, we think, hopefully?
Oh, yeah. I think it's going to be a shootout. I think these two teams have great offenses that are going to be going up and down the field. Drew Mestamaker, we talked about him. He was a purchase today on the Day Trade and Danny segment we did on the Cover 3s. 11 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. But North Texas has been awesome, but they haven't been tested. I'd like to see a team that's been battle-tested. And you want to say, you want to see battle-tested on the road? How about going into the swamp already and having one of the bigger surprise wins of the season, which South Florida already did? Not to mention, they handled Boise State at home as well. Byron Brown has been awesome. Alex Golish is one of the better coaches, hot name that's coming up. I trust USF more than I trust North Texas, so I will lay that 1.5.
Yeah, there's something interesting with this line, Tommy, because we see, North Texas opens slight favorite, then all of a sudden you're seeing a lot of push towards USF, though a lot of people are excited about North Texas. They feel undervalued, and it very much split on which way this is going to go. I cannot feel any confidence in terms of who's going to end up winning this game because it's going to be stupid. It's going to be high scoring. It's going to come down to a fumble or a late touchdown or just who runs out of time. But as I'm looking at this, I think it is important to note that USF, as Danny mentioned, has gone up against much better competition, and North Texas has allowed touchdown to much, much worse competition. I lean towards the over, but my very best bet is to identify the USF over. So I'm not in disagreement with Danny. I'm not in disagreement with the line move. I certainly agree with the high total, but for the thing that I'm the most confident in, that I want to go in to this sweaty and crazy Friday night matchup, it's going to be that USF can get me to 35 points.
Speaking of like sicko bets, I had 63.5 in the North Texas, South Alabama, and it was close. It ended up being in the high 50s. Imagine getting all those points and not covering in a game like that. We could see it again in this game. So it's time to get a little bit of a vibe check. It was a big matchup last week out in Tallahassee with Miami and Florida State. And for the Noles, getting out the gates hot. Wins over Alabama, taking care of business against lesser competition at home. But there have been some problems the last two games, including that loss to the Canes at Doak Campbell. Danny, before we get to a pick against Pitt in a 10.5 point spread, just what's the vibe check from a Nole perspective?
This game is the most important game of Mike Norvell's career.
Career?
Yeah. I mean, he's had some big games already because his job security is on the line. And I know there's buyout that comes into play, and you wonder if Florida State can handle that. But from a perception, national perception and local perception, even there in Tallahassee, what fans are thinking is you've got to show that last year was the fluke, not the Alabama win. Because there's a lot of people now that are saying, well, that Alabama team, they're a different team than they were that played against Florida State. I still think Florida State is a really good, talented team. I think they got beaten by a really tough Virginia team that, by the way, went and won on the road versus Louisville, and a Miami team which might be the best team in the country. So I think a bounce back is exactly what Florida State needs, and they better get, because if they don't, boy, it's going to feel more reminiscent to last season. And then it's, oh, this team is fraudulent. They're not that good. You've got a culture problem. So I think it is the most important game of Mike Norvell's career to this point.
And you think the boys will deliver, because both you and Chip are on the spread. You also like the total in this game.
I do. I think the offense gets back on track. We saw them in the fourth quarter get hot. They scored a little bit too little, too late in that game. I think Tommy Castellanos cleans up the interceptions. He had 2 of them against Miami, which were really costly. But there were still big plays to be made all over the place. Just came up short when it mattered. And the defense, I do think, takes advantage of a home field crowd. I think Tony White will do a good job of pressuring a young quarterback who will be making his first start for Pitt. I know he was impressive coming off the bench last week. Heinchel, right?
Mason Heinchel.
Mason Heinchel was really good. This will be an atmosphere which is completely different, and a defense which I do think will step up. I think this is a rallying cry for Florida State, where they do get off on the better foot. Hopefully this propels them to a better end of the season than they had last year.
Yeah, Danny, the way that Florida State stormed back into the game didn't change my mind about the matchup with Miami. It changed my mind about what to expect from the Seminoles going forward, because that was a sign of a healthier culture, because the game was over. And I know, Danny, if there was a fifth quarter, Florida State would have won. But I'm telling you, for a 60-minute game, the game was over. But the fact that Florida State continued to fight, the fact that Florida State continued to compete at a high level on both sides of the ball, getting the stops they need, getting the scores they need, that was the one that had me going into the next week, which we already knew was going to be a home game against Pitt, that it made me thinking, like, okay, this is not going to be another example of Mike Norvell letting one loss become 2 or letting one loss become 10. This is going to be an example of Florida State showing the 2025 team is different and that they can respond. And so I've got Florida State laying the 10.5. I will say it probably helps that Pitt destroyed Boston College last week and maybe feels a little good about themselves. Maybe if Pat Narduzzi was a little bit angrier or feistier or backed into a corner with his hair up, that, you know, maybe I'd go with the different vibes angle. But it's a better football team, and I think they're going to have a good response.
48-7 win over BC, and for Heinchel, 4 touchdown passes. First Pitt true freshman quarterback to win in his first career start since Kenny Pickett in 2019. Wazoo catching a good old 33.5 at Von Hemingway here. Ole Miss in a total of 58.5. You guys are both here on the Rebels to take care of business. Chip, first half, Danny, full game. So, Chip, why don't you lay for it first?
Yeah, I mean, this is just, I don't want to try to count in the grind of an SEC schedule. I don't want to count on the motivations of the third and the fourth quarter in a game where Ole Miss is absolutely going to be the class of this contest. They are going to be way, way better than Washington State. I don't know how much of the Cougars everyone's gotten their eyes on, but it's not even a mid-tier version of the Washington State football team that we'd come to understand and expect over the last couple of years. So I'm going to take Ole Miss in the first half. I think they want to start fast because they'd like to get those backups in to make sure that everybody is as healthy as possible going into next week.
But one of those backups just happens to be a quarterback who started the season with high expectations and fell well short of them. And Trinidad Chambliss, this is his team now. I think that is very clear. He's been one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC. So to your point, Chip, I think you get Trinidad Chambliss in, you have a comfortable lead, but then you got to work on your backup quarterback situation and keep Austin Simmons happy. Let him go out there and execute and, more importantly, put up some points. We already saw Lane Kiffin once against Kentucky apologize and saying, I probably cost some people some money. There's not a coach in college football who pays attention more to taking care of his boosters. I think they could call their number, and I think they will, and it will be over that spread, that massive point spread, because he wants to keep his backers happy.
Get right game in terms of getting your guys happy game in October for Ole Miss and Wazoo. And they do have a couple of tough tests up ahead. We've got Georgia and Oklahoma both on the road the next 2 games for Lane Kiffin and company. Much smaller spread at Georgia Tech and Atlanta hosting Vatech, 14.5 with a total of 54.5. The Tecmo Bowl, if you will, boys. So Chip Patterson, we thinking total here, points, lots of points, or points at a premium?
Yeah, I mean, you say Tecmo. I can just flash you back to when this game used to decide who was going to be representing the ACC Coastal Division in the conference championship when Frank Beamer and Paul Johnson had their respective programs both running hot at the same time. I'm going to be going with the under here. There's two angles. Number one, Virginia Tech really tried to pour it out against Wake Forest in a tough home loss, but I was not very impressed with that team offensively. And then for Georgia Tech in this matchup, they are favored by 14.5. This is going to be a big opportunity to just run the football, establish that ground game, and then try to make sure that we keep this thing short, keep this thing crispy. So 54.5 is just a shade too many 2 points for me. I would have thought something in the high 40s is more appropriate given Virginia Tech's ineptitude offensively. So I will go under the total. I expect Georgia Tech to win easily, but I'm not going to have to sweat the 14 and a hook.
So I think the best thing that happened to Brent Key was happened against Wake Forest, because that game they should have lost. There was a offsides call that was missed by the ACC officials, which would have given Wake one of the bigger upsets of the season. Jake Dickert has done a phenomenal job there, by the way. But that was what Brent Key needed to make sure his team was focused. That game also was in Winston-Salem, this time back in Atlanta. You mentioned Virginia Tech kind of shooting their load there against Wake. I think that was their best effort there. I think this is a get-right game for Georgia Tech. That was the wake-up call they needed. Haynes King and company get it done with a big win at home.
Let's get to Notre Dame, which is once again right around a 3-touchdown favorite. And I mentioned right around 3 touchdowns because last week, you guys both liked them against Boise at 20.5. But it crept up to 21, then 21.5, and even 22. 28-7 was the final, folks. Depending on where you got it and when you got it, certainly mattered. This time, 22.5 against NC State with a total of 60.5. We continue, guys, to talk about what Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman need to do. They need to win. They need to get style points. That's why we were betting team total overs and Notre Dame to cover, which they did, but overly close here. Both, again, you guys like Notre Dame in this game. Danny, tell me why.
I hate this pick, but it's like
okay,
what you
more
have
of a lean,
to do.
More of a lean.
It's more of a lean,
okay.
But it's kind of what you have to do. And Dave Doran's squad, like this feels ripe for a game where Dave Doran and company show up and like a surprise, great defensive performance. But I think NC State has kind of struggled to find an identity. They haven't been that quite as physical as they've been in the past. And oh boy, Notre Dame is getting right. The defense is starting to play a lot better than what we saw against them at Texas A&M and what we even saw at Miami, where they still were pretty good defensively. And C.J. Carr quietly is playing quarterback as good as anybody in the country. And I think it's just the play that you have to assume Notre Dame is going to try to dominate as much as they can. So if there is an opportunity late to punch in a score, to go over that number and try to impress by the scoreboard, they will do that. So I'm going to go ahead and back Notre Dame. I don't love it. It's more of a lean, but I think it's the play you have to make.
I'm going to go hyper-specific here, gentlemen. So we know that NC State's defense isn't anything close to what we saw when, Peyton Wilson was out there, Tanner Engel, even you can take it all the way back to Bradley Chubb if you want to look at the true Dave Doran era. But one thing that this defense has been really bad at has been allowing explosive runs. Nearly every single game against FBS competition has included at least one really long breakaway run, and that ain't good going up against Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. I think that what Danny said about Notre Dame's defensive improvement and specifically the showing against Boise State probably means they are hearing us. They are watching CBS Sports Network, CBS Sports HQ, and the Cover 3 podcast, because that has been what we all pointed to as the biggest issue for Notre Dame. I think that they will answer the bell. And as to not being able to cover last week, everyone threw all these stats at me about Marcus Freeman against unranked group of 5 opponents, and here's all this awful body of work. Fine, I hope you had your day. Well, this ain't that. This is a team from the ACC that's coming to your house. They'll treat them like a power conference competition. They'll treat them like ACC competition, which Notre Dame usually makes easy work of. I think the Fighting Irish cover handily.
Let's round out the 3:30 slate in terms of ranked teams. So we have Iowa State laying 3.5 in Boulder against Colorado. I liked Cincinnati last week. I told you guys that. Everybody in the college football pregame show liked Iowa State. They just got down too early, made a nice valiant effort, lost 38-30. Danny, you were actually taking the Buffs and the points. So is this more of a fade of what you saw last week with the Cyclones? Take me through the handicap of how you see this playing out.
This is both. Plus, I have 5 favorites that I've backed in a row. So I need an underdog in this segment here. But I do think Deion Sanders' squad has quietly been putting up pretty good efforts. They've been fighting really hard. They've been figuring out what they want to do. After a revolving door at quarterback, they finally settled on one, Caden Salter. And the defense actually has been performing pretty well. And I think the line kind of tells you what you need to know on this one. How is a top 25 team with only one loss and they're only a 3.5-point favorite? Boulder, I think this will be a good home field crowd, even though the season has fallen short of expectations. I think those Colorado players, and I do think the athletes on the field will favor the Colorado Buffaloes. So I like Colorado here, potentially even an upset here for a signature win for the season for Colorado.
Okay. See, I think Iowa State's going to have some offensive success against this Colorado defense. I think that Rocco Beck did a great job of being able to just continue to stand up and throw punch after punch after punch. I mean, 48 pass attempts is not what Matt Campbell necessarily wants to see. He'd like a little bit more balance, but Cincinnati had stuffed the run, and Rocco Beck said, "That's okay, coach, give me the ball." Season high, 314 passing yards on the performance for Beck, even added a couple scores on the ground as well. I just think this Cyclones offense right now is going to be able to go and put up points. I was looking at the team total. We catch 27.5 for a group that was so resilient after a really tough start against Cincinnati. I like backing them here. I think Iowa State's able to avoid the upset, but the thing I'm most confident in is they'll be able to put points on the scoreboard.
Rocco Beck had his most statistical best days in that comeback effort that fell short against Cincy on the road. We got to hit our last break here on the show. Last group of games, we're talking late afternoon and night games. LSU's got a night game, hosting South Carolina with a spread of 8.5. And I'll give you guys a hint. The guys like Go Tigers on Saturday. Home stretch time, so late afternoon and night games on Saturday. Back here with DK and Chip. Arkansas catching 12.5 against Tennessee. This is, of course, Bobby Petrino coming in for Sam Pittman. Tennessee, we haven't seen him in a little while here, laying the number with a total. Another one that's high at 68 and a hook. Chip Patterson, you and Danny are on the same side in terms of how you guys want to play this. You do have a good start right out the gate for the Vols.
Yeah, Tennessee first quarters are back. I don't know about all the fashion trends that go in and out, but I'll tell you that when you see that Tennessee first quarters are back, you go and you get that denim out, you throw it on, we're rocking it, we're singing Rocky Top, because Josh Heupel's first 15 plays, when he likes his quarterback and he has a stud wide receiver, well, then they find ways to dial up explosives from the very first possession. I think Tennessee defensively is also up to par as being part of that standard that is often overlooked when we spend so much time focusing on the offenses. It would not surprise me at all if Arkansas on the road with an interim coach isn't exactly buttoned up from the jump. So yeah, give me Tennessee in the first quarter. It's been an ATM before, and it might be activated again.
Yeah, so you're not buying into the bump that we saw at UCLA with an interim coach and a 33-year-old offensive coordinator? I am not either. Though, some of these situations you hear the team falls in love with their coach and they love the interim coach. Bob Petrino is a great offensive mind. I don't know if he's somebody that really is a great motivator and gets everybody on the same page to play together. And while he is coaching for his potential future at Arkansas, and he also cleaned out 3 defensive coaches, I just think it's too little too late for Arkansas. Tennessee gets off to a fast start like you think, and I do think Taylon Green, who's been a little bit more willing to take some risk and cough the ball up lately, I think he struggles in a tough road environment against the Tennessee defense, which might be one of the better stories in the SEC that's going uncovered. I think Tennessee wins big.
Now we enter the Texas school portion of the show here. Florida catching 7.5 at Texas A&M at Kyle Field, a total 47.5. And we've already talked about the Gators' schedule. This is like their 4th straight top 10 matchup, not since the 68 Illinois team has had to do that here. The 7.5, we've got a lot of hook games around key numbers, Danny, but the Aggies laying it here at home against the Gators, who had that win against Texas.
They did. Was that an anomaly? Was that something that just happened because it was at the Swamp and you were facing Arch Manning, who did struggle a little bit with a couple of those interceptions? I'm going to say it was, and I don't know if I can trust DJ Lagway yet, who's been incredibly volatile this season. One of his best games was last weekend, but one of his worst happened in Baton Rouge on the road when he threw those 5 interceptions. And I know that could be a significant turning point for the Florida Gators season, but boy, they're running into a buzzsaw here in College Station. I like the Aggies to get it done. I think they're one of the more complete teams. The defense, Mike Elko's back under control, calling the defensive plays. They've been really good. And the offense is really starting to find their rhythm. Marcel Reed finally, started to show a little element of a pass game. They're able to run the football. The 2 transfer portal wide receivers have been outstanding. I think it's too much firepower. I like the Aggies to win and cover.
Yeah, I'm just a total hypocrite here. I'm sitting here telling you that at 43.5, that line's too little. It's disrespectful, and those are 2 more woeful offenses than we're dealing with. And yet in the same time together, I'm telling you to take the under. But I think that Florida's defense is what impressed me the most in that performance against Texas. I know that they've been banged up, but they were just getting after it, playing with their hair on fire. I think that they will be able to limit some of the explosive plays that Texas A&M has been able to hit against lesser competition. And like Danny said, I just think Texas A&M's defense had a couple hiccups early in the year, but man, they have been really good the last couple of games, whether it was against Auburn, where I think that Texas A&M's offense was really struggling, or then against Mississippi State, a team who was able to put it on, teams like Arizona State and Tennessee, but just couldn't get any success at all against the Aggies. Defensively, they're taking some big steps forward. So for Texas A&M, with the Florida team in town, I think they want to just kind of choke them out and make them quit. Not to get too graphic or violent here, but, Florida's riding high. You want to take away their will to compete, make them run out of gas, and I think that leads to a game script that ends up going under.
All right, so from College Station to Lubbock, we have Texas Tech in the top 10, 14.5-point favorites against Kansas. Boy, I was impressed with Texas Tech. Of course, that defense on the road. I know Houston was a bit of fool's gold, but I thought the Cougs would be able to put some points up. They only put up 11 against Texas Tech last weekend. So you guys both like Kansas here. Danny, full game, Chip in a different capacity. I'm interested in seeing why you guys want to grab the points with the Jayhawks here. Chip?
Okay, I think that Texas Tech is the deeper team. I think they've got more talented players, and I think they've got more talent along their levels of backup. I think over the course of 60 minutes, that talent gap could end up being exposed. But there's something that is a little bit of an alarm bell going off, and it was Texas Tech's inability to punch it in the end zone when they were playing against Houston. Far too many field goals. I mean, it was a game that they were able to win handily by the final margin, but early on, it was just not that impressive. Running the football when the field got small just wasn't really happening. Sometimes against a team as explosive as Kansas, when you settle for 3, it's more like a -4 because you didn't get the touchdown. So I think that Kansas, coming into this game with a chance to be able to really have a statement win, I think they'll be very competitive, but I think I want to get out at halftime, because if this game goes a little bit deeper, the depth issue could end up exposing itself on the final margin. But I don't hate Kansas for the full game either. This is a big number for a team that can be as explosive as the Jayhawks.
And a team that was in a fourth quarter tussle with Missouri, a game we previewed earlier. And everybody talks about Missouri, what a good team they are. They do not flinch. Veteran quarterback in Jalen Daniels, who's been outstanding again this year. He's been healthy most of the season for Kansas Jayhawks. Lance Leipold is one of the better game planners who gets his team up for games specifically like this as an underdog. I do think Texas Tech wins because of what Chip is talking about. They have one of the better defenses in the Big 12. Baron Morton is playing outstanding for them. They've showcased the ability to win in different ways. But I think this is a Kansas special where they fight and claw until the very end and do keep that within the 2 touchdowns. I think Texas Tech wins, but I do like Kansas in the points.
So we're grabbing all the points we can with the Jayhawks. Let's see if you guys are grabbing points at Tiger Stadium with LSU. South Carolina, 8.5 is the spread. And you guys are both taking the Tigers here, but I'm also interested, Danny, in knowing if Garrett Nussmeier is going to get going. No 100-yard game this year so far, and he had 8 last year.
Yeah, it's been one of the surprise disappointments of the season. The wonder has been Garrett Nussmeier. Is his health okay? It was the knee in training camp. Then it's been this torso issue throughout the season. The offensive line has been banged up. They haven't played very well, but I do think this is a get-right game at Baton Rouge. South Carolina, I know Lenore Sellers has been playing better. And boy, we talked earlier about a nail-biter game with Georgia and Auburn. if Shane Beamer somehow pulls off this upset, oh my goodness, watch out for the people, the LSU fans coming after Brian Kelly. And on the flip side, if Shane Beamer loses this game by double digits, which is what I think is more likely outcome, then there's going to be some South Carolina fans which are extremely upset over the way this season has unfolded based on expectations around a star QB early. But I do think LSU's defense will be enough to get it done. I think LSU wins comfortably by 10 or more, so I'll go ahead and lay the points.
And for a group of seniors that's lost one game at night at Tiger Stadium. Come on, y'all, this is Brian Kelly at night. He's not losing to South Carolina. Brian Kelly's lost one game at night in Tiger Stadium. It ain't going to be here against this South Carolina team. LSU might have its own issues. I think offensively they will be benefited by getting Caden Durham back. I think offensively they'll be benefited by a week off to continue to work on an offensive line that has fallen well short of expectations. But I think in general, this ain't the team that's going to be able to come and hand the LSU a loss under the lights in Baton Rouge. You know, we take LSU, we lay the points.
I think I misspoke. That's my 300-yard game. He had 8 last year. He hasn't had a 300-yard game this year. A couple more games before we round out this show. Number 18, BYU laying a short number. It's 1.5 in Tucson against Arizona with a total at 48.5. Chip does like the total, but Danny, I'll go with you. Play on the spread. Maybe money line minus 115.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit safer. Yes,
yeah.
Especially in the Big 12 where you can see some wild, wacky finishes. Kalani Sitake, I say this every week, he's one of the more underrated coaches in the country, and he really works well with what they do at BYU, which is get veteran guys to come in and play. So he's got some veterans around a freshman quarterback who has been actually playing really well with the BYU offense, running the ball primarily, but he's a weapon back there. But the defense, I think, is what steps up, and defense travels. So I'll back BYU here. It's not a game that I love, but I do think BYU wins.
All right, I'm going to go with the total, as you mentioned, Tommy. This is the number 1 and number 3 defenses in the Big 12. Both of these teams allowing less than 250 yards per game. It's a little bit of a surprise. I don't know if the market necessarily has Arizona painted as what they are, which is a dead under team. Currently 111th nationally in terms of over margin per game, failing to hit the over at 5.9 points per game. So I think that we've got a good opportunity with two of the Big 12's best defenses and a little bit of a market anomaly in terms of Arizona unders. That all leads to me feeling comfortable taking under for the full game.
Yeah, Arizona's been a tough team to kind of figure out from a betting perspective. Yeah. But as you take a look at BYU, we saw the schedule there. They've got Utah. Speaking of Utah, they're at home hosting number 21 Arizona State. Arizona State climbing up the ladder despite not having to play a game, which is certainly nice. 5.5, though, is what ASU is catching, and you guys are on opposite ends. Danny, I'll have you start first. Give us a little bit of tease. Which side are you on here?
Hold on. I got to finish up this game of Clash Royale, which Kenny Dillingham says is the secret sauce for his team because they're not scrolling on TikTok. They're competitive in Clash Royale, one of the hottest games in the country. None of that's going to matter because I do think Sam Leavitt is the secret ingredient for Arizona State, as well as Raleek Brown, their running back, who's been an outstanding run force. They've been getting him more involved. So it's not just the Sam Leavitt, Jordan Tyson show. And I don't trust the quarterback for Utah just yet in order for him to go out there and make the plays that he needs to. Devin Dampier, he's been really good running the football. We saw him struggle at home against a Texas Tech defense, which forced him into a couple interceptions. He was his health a concern, but this is too many points for me in a Big 12 matchup, which I think is two of the best teams in the league. I think this is a field goal game all day long, so I'll take those 5.5 points. Way too many here. I'll take the Sun Devils.
Lay 'em. Come on, you don't go into Rice-Eccles Stadium in front of the mighty Utah student section and think you're coming out with the win under the lights at 10 a.m. local time? Sure, but not under the lights because this is a pride game for this Utah team. This is a pride game for this Utah coaching staff because Morgan Scalley, the defensive coordinator, is already been tabbed as the coach in waiting. Jason Beck, he came over with Devin Dampier. We're bringing the new offense, the New Mexico offense. This is going to be fantastic. And it has been great against the likes of West Virginia, not so much against Texas Tech. I do think that the Texas Tech data point is maybe a little bit more about Texas Tech than it is about Utah. But Utah and Arizona State, to me, are on the same tier. Utah and Texas Tech might not be. If you're playing at home with this opponent in town, this is your last chance to stay in the Big 12 title hunt. Pride game for Utah and the Utah coaching staff especially. I'll take the Utes and lay the points.
And with that, Week 7 done and dusted. DK, Chip, guys, certainly appreciate it. By the way, if you're watching on YouTube, also hit the like button, hit subscribe. Same thing over the Cover 3. They were in Tallahassee for that Miami-Florida State matchup. They've got locks on Thursdays, instant reaction Saturdays. Bud Elliott, Tom Fornelli also in the fold. Scan the QR code and check out the fellas ASAP.